the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
We expect India's full collaboration to make sure that we get to the bottom of this. And as of today, and as a consequence, we've expelled a top Indian diplomat from Canada.
Hello and welcome to our special edition of Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. In a big blow to India-Canada ties, the Canadian government has expelled a top Indian diplomat, RAW Station Chief Pavan Kumar Rai. This after Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that the government has credible allegations against the Indian government. Addressing the parliament, he claimed that India may have links to the assassination of Khalistani separatist leader Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Prime Minister Trudeau said, and I quote him, "Killing of a Canadian citizen on the country's soil is an unacceptable violation of our sovereignty." End of quote. Just hours after Prime Minister Trudeau's statement, the Indian government has rejected the allegations and has lodged a strong protest, calling Canada's claims absurd and motivated as well. India has also expelled a senior Canadian diplomat as a retaliatory measure and has summoned the Canadian High Commissioner who was... We're also tracking who was Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Nijjar was gunned down on 18th of June outside the Sikh Cultural Centre in Surrey. He was declared as a designated terrorist by India in 2020 after he was allegedly involved in recruiting and training people for the banned terrorist outfit Khalistan Tiger Force. The Indian government also claimed that he was part of the separatist group Sikhs for Justice. Now let me take you through the key trade and business relations between India and Canada. The trade between the two countries in 2022 was around $10.5 billion. The Commerce Minister has said that the free trade agreement talks between the two nations are on hold. The two nations want to ensure that they are on the same page economically and geopolitically as well. Also, the Canadian Pension Plan Board has made several investments in listed and unlisted Indian companies. Recent filings show that those investments amount to over 1 lakh crore rupees. These developments come a week after Prime Minister Trudeau skipped a dinner for G20 leaders after allegedly being sidelined during the summit. In a statement published by the Indian Foreign Ministry, Prime Minister Modi conveyed very strong concerns about continuing anti-India activities of extremist elements in Canada. He further stated that these elements are promoting secessionism and also are inciting violence against Indian diplomats. Let me now take this forward with our guest. We're joined by Jayant Dasgupta, former Indian ambassador to the World Trade Organization, Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat, and we're also joined by KC Singh, former Indian ambassador to Iran. Ambassador KC Singh, do you think this is something that had been brewing for the past few months? The Canadian National Security Advisor had travelled to India. She travelled to UK. It seems that the Canadian government has taken the US, France, and also the United States on board with this entire exercise, telling them about the allegations against India.
Well, there is a Reuters report that White House is quoted as saying that they are deeply concerned about these charges. So yes, they've taken all their G7 friends and allies into confidence. I agree with you that this is something which has been brewing since June itself. Because as you know, the diaspora, elements of the diaspora started protesting, and this has been going around at the popular level that the Indian government is involved. So this allegation has been there coming from the street and the protests right from the beginning when the murder took place. Now, that was the time where I think India needed to engage Canada, Canada needed to engage India, rather than publicly leveling allegations at each other. Of course, Indian government is upset that as far as reeling the Khalistani elements and bringing them under control, not giving them a long rope, that Prime Minister Trudeau and the Canadian government haven't done enough. It is true that that is so. The Canadian government, of course, gives a defense that this is freedom of speech, and if they indulge in violence, we will take action against them. So it's been going on. This public recrimination exchanges have been going on for the last 3 months. I think the last opportunity available was when Prime Minister Trudeau came here. There was news which was given to the Canadian papers before he arrived that he was going to take up with the Indian Prime Minister the Indian interference in Canada. That means he already had that in his hand. Now, we don't know, when you make a public charge like that, he's talking of a potential link. Normally, between countries, particularly friendly countries, you do not start naming and declaring diplomats persona non grata simply on the basis of a potential link. We haven't seen anybody arrested. We haven't seen any nexus established between the Indian High Commission or the officials and the killers. In fact, we don't even know who the killer is. So this is a big leap. Maybe Canadian government has more information that they have not shared or more evidence. But it would have been better if this case was built up gradually and the Indian government was given an opportunity to present counter evidence. They haven't done that. They've just jumped to a conclusion.
Right.
And that has really widened the gap between India and Canada.
Right. Ambassador Sajjanhar, to get you in at this stage, the fact that the identity of the RNAW's station chief in Canada, the identity was revealed in this manner, the name was leaked by the Canadian Foreign Ministry. What does this really go to show? India and Canada have friendly relations, and friendly countries don't do this to each other.
No, you're very right. I don't think the friendly countries do this to each other. You know what I'm also surprised about? What is the meaning of credible allegations? You know, if the allegation, that means there is very little evidence, there is no proof. What is the meaning of credible allegations? You know, if there is some evidence, you come out with the evidence and speak to the partners, speak to the friends, and, you know, taking this up with all, as you said, the G7 countries. I don't know, Parikshit, whether I will also tend to agree with the, you know, you said that the United States is on board. On board would mean that, you know, it agrees with what Canada is saying. I don't think that's the case. They have just said that they are concerned, of course, you know, two friendly countries, friends both of the United States and friends amongst each other, this sort of a thing happening. You know, this is very unfortunate. You know, the other aspect is that there might have been some issues, some level of, you know, recrimination as far as Canada is concerned. I don't think it's only a 3-month-long issue. The whole aspect, you know, this whole tableau thing that, you know, they allowed this tableau with the assassination images of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, or the fact that there have been this referendum going on, the fact that there have been these threats that have been made against Indian diplomats and these secessionist tendencies. This has been going on for a long time. And, you know, this would, you know, what is really immediately visible and evident is that, you know, Prime Minister Modi travels to so many countries, cementing friendships, cementing relations, etc. And you would see that his visit to Canada was in 2015, a year after he came to office. After that, since the time that Trudeau has been in power, Prime Minister Modi has not traveled. So, you know, it has been, the whole issue has been there for quite some time. And, you know, just in comparison to the south of Canada, to the United States, Prime Minister Modi has traveled 8 times. So there has been this stress, there has been this tension between the two countries. But the fact, the manner in which it would come up, I think this is, and the charges, I quite agree with what the Indian government has said. It is quite absurd. It is quite preposterous. In fact, India is at the receiving end of such activities from across our western border. And India is, you know, a democracy. It would never do a thing like this, intervene in the internal affairs in such a brazen manner. We take it up with the concerned government and expect that government to take whatever action is required and necessary. So I think in that sense, the manner in which this has been taken, I think is, as has been said earlier, it is with an eye to domestic vote bank. This is the manner in which Justin Trudeau had conducted himself when he came here for his visit in 2018. Right. And this is what seems to be the basic motivation as to why this sort of an action has been taken without any evidence whatsoever. Parikshit.
Right. Let me get in Ambassador Dasgupta at this point. Ambassador Dasgupta, we were very keenly negotiating a trade agreement with Canada. Those talks have been paused now. The trade mission that was supposed to travel from Canada to India, that has been halted. That's not going to happen in October now. The Commerce Minister has said that we need to be geopolitically aligned, and clearly there are issues between the two countries, issues in the relationship. How do you think the business ties could be impacted going further, considering that Trudeau is not very popular politically right now? His popularity ratings are fading. Do you think there could be more drastic measures which could be impacting business? And just to put in perspective for our viewers, we have over 230,000 Indian students there. We have a big Indian diaspora in Canada, trade to the tune of $11 billion and around 4 or 5 billion in services. Ambassador Dasgupta.
Well, business ties, I don't think, are going to get affected because it is conducted by private enterprises and they seek mutual benefit through trade deals. So the goods trade itself is worth about $8 billion between India and Canada. And India, has a large number of items which it exports, of course, in very small volume in terms of value, if you look at it. But Canadians are also doing it in many areas. But the mainstay of the Canadian exports is in fertilizers, which is about $700 million out of $4 billion. And there are other items. I don't think the trade relations or the bilateral trade is going to get affected. Of course, we were looking forward to an FTA, which would have given both the countries increased market access in each other's market. That would have improved relations further. But trade, I think, will not get affected on account of this controversy which has arisen. And I think this is, of course, related. I entirely agree with Ambassador Sajjanhar when he mentioned that this has got to do with domestic politics, the way in which Prime Minister Trudeau has approached this and has given a statement in Parliament. And amongst his supporters or constituents, maybe there are some who subscribe to this small group of people who are creating trouble. The problem in Canada, I think, is that the way we have been, our diplomats have been threatened, our missions have been threatened, and all kinds of very objectionable activities like the tableau on late Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's assassination, these have been shown. They have created, I think, the wrong kind of impression about Canada in India. And this needs to be dispelled. And the Canadian government had to take stern action against such people who are wanted in India in various criminal cases. Hardeep Singh Nijjar, for instance, was accused of the Ludhiana bomb blast case in which 6 people had died. And the NIA had declared a rupees 10 lakh reward on him in 2022. So the Canadian government, I think, has shown a certain degree of insensitivity towards Indian views in curbing.
And allegations against Nijjar have been out in public domain for a very long time. Ambassador Dasgupta, I have to take a short break. I'll request all our panelists to stay with us. We'll be right back and we'll be focusing on India-Canada relations going forward. Now, will the latest diplomatic tensions between India and Canada impact economic ties? Pavitra is now joining us. Pavitra, give us a sense of the kind of investments that Canada, the Canadian government and Canadian pension funds have made in Indian companies.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the Canadian pension plan has made several investments in India, both in listed as well as unlisted companies. And if you look at the total amount, this is over 1 lakh crores in terms of the total. Let me just run you through some of the Indian companies where the Canadian pension fund has a stake. There are a lot of new companies in this list. So first of all, CPPIB has a 6% stake in logistics platform Delivery. This is valued at close to 1880 crore rupees. Next on their list is their investment in Paytm. In fact, the Canadian pension plan was an anchor investor as well in the Paytm IPO, and then they increased their shareholding. This is when Paytm's shares had hit an all-time low last year. So now they hold around 1.76% stake, and this is valued at just over 970 crores. Now, the Canadian pension plan also holds a 2.37% stake in food delivery platform Zomato. This is currently valued at over 2,000 crores, 2,078 crores to be precise. And like I was telling you, there's a lot of new age companies in this list. So they also have put in money into Nykaa. In fact, they were anchor investors here as well, and then went ahead and bought 300 crores worth of shares. This is in November of last year, so November of 2022. So now if you look at it, the CPPIB holds 1.47% in Nykaa. This is valued at around 625 crore rupees. But moving away from the new age companies, also there are a bunch of investments. So they hold 2.15% in Indus Towers. This is valued at 1,085 crores. And the next one would be, there are a couple of big banks here actually. So the next one is their investment of $1.15 billion in Kotak Mahindra Bank. This was way back in 2015. And then if you look at the most recent shareholding data, that stake is currently of 2.68%. But remember, the Canadian pension fund had also sold around 1.66% in Kotak Mahindra Bank in June of this year, so very recently. And the remaining stake is currently valued at around 9,582 crores. Another big bank as well, this was Kotak, but they also have positions in ICICI Bank that is valued at $10 million. And they're also exposed, this is interesting, to a bunch of US listed shares of both Wipro and Infosys. So their investment in Wipro's US shares is of $1.92 million, while if you look at that of Infosys, this is also Infosys US listed shares, that is $21.7 million. Now, those are all of the listed entities, but like I was mentioning, they also have some money in unlisted Indian companies. So they got into the Piramal Enterprises in 2019. This is for India's first renewable InvIT. They also have a strategic alliance with the Shapurji Pallonji Group to acquire stabilized office buildings in major metro cities. And finally, they also have an alliance with L&T Infra, and they have committed around $332 million. So all in all, like I was telling you, this amounts to over 1 lakh crores.
All right, so that's a big amount. And one very quick question to Ambassador Dasgupta before we once again go across to Ambassador KC Singh and also Ambassador Sajjanhar. Ambassador Dasgupta, as my colleague Pavitra Parekh was pointing out, huge investments by Canadian funds in Indian entities, both listed and unlisted. While the business and trade ties may not get immediately impacted, but when it comes to the sentiment for India over the next 2 years, and considering that elections in Canada have to be held by October 2025, this rhetoric in Canada is bound to be high, also on the Indian side, which is going to go to elections next year. Do you think the investment sentiment among Canadian funds is going to change, and we may not see the same extent of investments as we've seen in previous years?
Well, frankly speaking, I don't think investment decisions will get affected by the recent controversy, which is, I think, more of a domestic political nature in Canada. And if we look at the Canadian people's sentiment or the company sentiment, I don't think they are going to get affected by a very minuscule minority of the Indian diaspora raising certain issues and creating controversies. So the investment firms or the Canadian pension fund, for instance, they are all looking at a long-term scenario, and they are there to stay.
Okay.
So they are not going to get affected by whether there is some controversy which may die out in the next few weeks, so to say. And the Canadian elections, though they are due in October 2025, there is a possibility that they may get advanced and be held much earlier, because there is political instability in Canada, and Prime Minister Trudeau's government is possibly in a minority on its own.
Ambassador Dasgupta.
So,
Right.
frankly speaking, investment decisions I don't think will get affected by this, because India-Canada ties are based on very solid economic grounds, on political grounds. We have
Like you said, businesses and investment funds, they take a long-term view of a country. Ambassador KC Singh, to get you back in, we have been speaking about how there are domestic compulsions driving the Trudeau government to speak like this. Their party is supported and has a strong support of the NDP, the New Democratic Party of Canada, which is headed by Jagmeet Singh. He tweeted 9 hours back saying that he vows to hold the Indian government responsible for the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. What do you think are the political compulsions? How big is this vote bank for Justin Trudeau right now if he wants to retain control of the government till October 2025?
Look, the Indian diaspora is about 4% of the population, and probably the Sikhs are around half of that. And they are concentrated geographically in a few provinces, and that is what gives them the clout. And that's why there have been 2 or 3 or 4 ministers even from the Sikh community in the previous governments or the Trudeau government also. So there is electoral clout as far as the Sikhs are concerned, and that can't be ignored domestically. But it depends how the opponents of Prime Minister Trudeau campaign and what are their vote banks. So it'll depend on that. It'll probably also depend on the economic situation in Canada. I don't think overall elections and the majority community will be voting simply taking into account this, this standoff with India. I agree with the previous speaker that long-term, short-term, it may not affect decisions of investors in Canada. It does affect things like free trade agreement, does affect any future movement where you're trying to leap forward. Though trade in goods may be $11 or $12 billion, the services trade is about $7 or $8 billion. So all told is about $18 or $20 billion worth of trade. But it does to say that it'll have no effect on anything would also be wrong, because there is a common perception. You can see the statement from White House can't be ignored. It says they are deeply distressed. They are not talking of simply noting what Trudeau has said. And this would also be noted in other countries. So we should not take it simply. But the fact that they have thrown out 2 of our diplomats means that they probably do not have any direct evidence linking them. Otherwise, they would have sought the lifting of their diplomatic immunity and their prosecution. Normally, if a country has the evidence, they would have gone to the next step. They haven't done that. So there is a degree of pleasing your base in this, because you don't have enough proof to link the diplomats. You have probably secondary evidence or hearsay that these are the people who got in touch with someone, who did the killing. So there is a weakness in the stand that the Canadian government has taken. And very clearly, Trudeau has done it for domestic reasons. Yeah.
All right. I'm running out of time. One final comment to Ambassador Sajjanhar. Ambassador Sajjanhar, we've run out of time, but in 30 seconds, if you could give us a sense of the way forward, what India can do as far as its diplomatic toolkit is concerned, the step forward.
I think basically to put pressure on Canada, because, what India has said is that all this talking about credible allegations and, banishing one of our diplomats from there, it is taking the focus away from what the real issue is. And the real issue is the activities of the Khalistanis, in terms of their terrorist activities, their secessionist activities, their threats to Indian diplomats. So I think basically applying pressure on Trudeau that action is taken against these Khalistani terrorists. And, I think that's really the way forward. And otherwise, through the back channels, trying to see how we can, how this worsening of situation between the two sides, how this can be, taken care of, how this can be settled, and it doesn't blow up into a much bigger issue as far as the two countries are concerned.
Okay, we've run out of time. Ambassador KC Singh, Ambassador Sajjanhar, Ambassador Dasgupta, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective on this very clear diplomatic crisis between India and Canada at this juncture. That's a wrap on this special edition of Global Eye. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.